you know who made it.
Lee, welcome to the See Me Be Me podcast.
That's great to be with you guys.
So Lee, for the listeners, tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, and how did you set up Essentialise?
Yeah, so if I'm to just quickly run through, born and brought up in Bolton in the Northwest. First one in my family to uni, dropped out, went back again, set up a tech business, grew that, went on a journey despite a lot of doubt and a lot of people thinking that I wouldn't be able to make it. Then I got ill, had to learn to walk again, then decided actually I need to take a step back, find out what's important. And then when my kids started school, I was like, I need to go and change the world, do something different. So I decided to use my academic background in psychology to set up a wellbeing business that now ultimately focuses on inclusive, accessible, and effective wellbeing for organizations. And been doing that for 2.5 years, been a journey, like it always is. But you know what? When you set up something new, you're passionate about it, you make a difference, you create an impact. Every day you get up, you're ready to go and seize the day.
Excellent. And so take us back to your childhood. You know, you said you were brought up in Bolton. Do you know, when you were a kid, did you ever dream of like setting up and running your own business? Or, what did 8-year-old Lee Chambers want to be?
Yeah, so I suppose it was interesting, in growing up in the North and starting life on a council estate, you don't have the biggest aspirations. But I've always been a little bit, different, a bit non-conformist. I have like most people do, I have a crazy uncle, and that crazy uncle was like deep into computers in the late 80s and early 90s. And he just got me a Commodore 64. And that's what I was tapping away on that, waiting half an hour for the tape to load up. I was just like, actually, maybe one day I'll do something with computers, with tech. Like, this is new stuff. Like, I can do this, but my parents have no idea. So I'd always started to think, I'll probably do something technically. I was decent at school. When I applied myself, I was pretty good. Did I apply myself as much as I could have? Probably not. But I think a lot of people can say that. But yeah, I suppose as well, I was always quite entrepreneurial. Really, big thing for me was my dad worked like 12-hour shifts, grafting as like a manual engineer. There was a point where my mum was working 3 jobs, because they wanted social mobility for me and my younger brothers. And, my parents grafted. That's given me a work ethic as well, and seeing how valuable that is. But also, I remember thinking when I was like 8, 9, like, parents are like never here. And it's because they're trying to create a better future for us. But I thought, when I've got kids, I don't want to be kind of stuck in a factory for 12 hours, not being able to see my kids and just working just to pay stuff. I thought if I can build something myself, I can have that control. I can shape my life. And I was that kid who was like buying multi-pack cans, rolling up to secondary school with a cool box and selling them for £1 each. And at one point, actually, the teachers stopped us doing it. And I think it got to a point where, I'm there with like 2 cool boxes with wheels on, a PE kit on my back, like guy forgets his books for English, but he's got all this stuff with him, like not setting the best example. So I've always had a little bit of that spirit. I'm going to make something of my own, and always been a little bit like I want to build something that I can control.
It sounds similar to us because myself and Niall, we used to always sell cans and sweets, chocolates, just to earn a bit of money on the side and whatnot. So you could almost say that was the start of our entrepreneurial journey as well. Going on what you said, Lee, about your dad was working, you said 12-hour shifts, and your mum was working 3 part-time jobs. Yeah. So would you say that they were the most like influential people in your life growing up, and in terms of inspiring you to where you are now?
So I'd definitely say like my parents instilled a work ethic in me. Spent a lot of time with like my grandma and granddad, and they're, Windrush generation, came over to the UK. My granddad grafted. He used to work in the steelwork on the railways, and he was the one lifting things that other people couldn't lift. Man, you see the size of his hands. But yeah, ultimately, my granddad just kind of instilled with me, like, being a good human, be respectful, show up, turn up, and make things happen, take action. So I got a lot of like influence through my family. And the truth is, when you grow up on the estate, there's a hell of a lot of different influences, some positive, some not so positive, but you got to see how people went off on different paths and what happened if you carried on with them. You even saw really good people in difficult situations make choices that, in reflection, weren't good choices for them. and ended up, in really difficult places sometimes because they didn't have any choices. So I was always grateful for the choices that I had. When I got to university and I was looking out at trying to find who I was, and you start to look at externally for role models. I'm kind of like part entrepreneur, part scientist, part philosopher. And I looked out for can I see a black individual who's walked on that path? Yeah. And it's like football, acting, rapping. Couldn't see anyone like me. It was proper. Yeah. To be honest, it caused me a lot of pain, a lot of stress, because I was like, can I actually be it? Because I can't see it. And I'm struggling to kind of know and work out who I am. You need to be able to, see something external to just validate that you can go on that pathway. And that's what kind of drives me now to be quite vocal about these things, because it wasn't long after that I went out to seek a mentor, went and spoke to someone who's run 2 successful businesses in Manchester. This was 15 years ago. But, 50-year-old white guy, he's made successful. Yeah. But I go and ask him to be my mentor, and he's like, this ain't going to work for you, Lee. You're young, you're black, you got a bit of an attitude, you ain't got no investment behind you, you ain't got no network. Go out and smooth those rough edges and, get mingling and build a network and get yourself visible. And to be honest, you're going to take people's advice, right, when you can't see any other way. Yeah. But that doubt has fueled my journey ever since, really, because I don't like to be doubted. I'm going to go and prove what you can do, not what you can't.
And I was just wondering as well, did you have, going into education, did you have any sort of influences or even a role model going through school, college or university, anything like that? Or has it always been almost outside of that area where you found the most influence, would you say?
What I would say is I've had a few people around me, a few teachers who believed in me.
Yeah.
I had a head teacher who at primary school who kind of saw the talent that I had if I applied myself. And she kind of, made sure that I was kept on the right track. And I think like many of us, we had just a few teachers who were external adults who just kind of believed in us. Also had teachers who doubted me and thought I wouldn't account to nothing. But it's really powerful how you've got those who are able to actually back you when you're young and you're not necessarily going to back yourself. And you're looking, as much as I think that, adults are just children anyway, children are always looking for that influence, someone who's got a bit more privilege and power at that time as an adult to just back them. They don't need to do a lot. It just needs to be those positive words of reinforcement. The truth is we live in a world where if you're a black kid, you're more likely to be adultified, you're more likely to be stereotyped as trouble and not given that little bit of support to get you back on. So I'm passionate about that, but I'm also very grateful for those teachers who kind of guided me, because education, for many people, has become something that's created opportunity. And there's real value in that, even in this world today where the education system's got a whole load of issues. But what it can do is it can provide opportunity if it's accessible and if you've got people within that who keep you on the pathway.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And Lee, I just want to take it back to something you said before. At 8 years old, or it might have been earlier, your uncle gave you your first Commodore gaming system, which I've seen and I've played on a Commodore before, even though I'm a young guy myself. I played on a Commodore, and then you had that experience of being an entrepreneur at school, selling sweets and drinks, and then you went to university, and I believe you studied accounting.
So then you international business.
Oh, you studied international business.
Yeah,
and then you became you worked in the corporate finance world.
Mm-hmm.
And then you left to then set up your own business and become an entrepreneur again, where you had a video game business for, I believe, about 11 years.
Yeah.
Can you tell the viewers or the listeners about that business and what made you want to drop out of that corporate finance world?
What actually got me dropping out now was recession. So my grad scheme got pulled and I was made redundant. So actually it wasn't by choice. And, I'd spent 11 months at a national bank, grinding away on the grad scheme as you do, proving your worth, doing all the tasks that no one else wants to do, because, you've got to show you're resilient and you're worth investing in. But when the credit crunch came along, all those people who were imparting knowledge were packing the desks up, and for us, as 16 of us on the grad scheme, we thought we'd be all right because they don't pay grad scheme people much at all. But no, and ended up, being made redundant and having to move back home. The worst bit is my parents were sold up because they didn't think I was coming back. They thought I'd got a profession now. They took me off to buy me first suit and stuff like that because, he's made it. Off he's going to be, working in corp finance, he's going to make it big. But no, gets back out, end up back home. What I actually did at that point is, I come from a relatively deprived background. I had to just go and earn some money. So I got a job at Bolton Council, working in service development. And I'm not the type of character who's gonna really tolerate local government for too long. I'm too outspoken, I'm too innovative, and I'm too but you've done it for 30 years like that? That doesn't matter. Let's change it. But after 5 months, I actually used those wages as kind of just a seed to the start of the business. And it started out very simple, kind of reseller e-commerce, very much at the start of that digital adoption of purchasing. And the business just took off incredibly quickly. And all of a sudden, you're in a place where literally that started out of that back bedroom of my parents' house. And after a year, my parents' driveway was destroyed by the amount of incoming and outgoing deliveries. Then you get a unit. Hell, I've even made enough money to buy my own home. This was in my early 20s. I went from having nothing to having quite a lot really quickly. As that grew and as my responsibility grew, so did the stress. Running a business in your 20s when you've not got a lot of life experience is tough. You're hiring people who are older than you, probably wiser as well. But you gradually start to realize that every decision that you make has an impact on the livelihoods of others. Yeah. That was stressful. But also in an industry which is so agile and fast moving, you could never stop and reflect. You were constantly thinking, right, what's the next innovation? What's the next cycle? How can we grow? We kind of moved into software and started to consider how we build stuff around risk-based pricing. That was a project that went really well. We also then moved into a project around kind of membership boxes around merchandise, which took off really quickly and then very much fizzled out as one of our competitors with a much bigger budget, got a whole range of licenses and limited what we could do. And yeah, I still got slightly bitter feelings towards that company today, but it's business. But the biggest thing for me was 5 years in, we started to operate across Europe. It felt great on one hand to have proven those doubters wrong, but that very success started to chase me down the hill. It's difficult when you're in it to realize what you've built and what you've done. But then when I became ill, holy crap, I had to stop. And then I had a lot of time to reflect, and that was a real turning point in my journey.
And talk us through that period. So you were running a quite successful business.
Basically, I'm working one Friday, and my wrist starts to swell up, and I'm like, have I banged it? Or have I just been, working too hard on the keyboard this week? Yeah. I thought, if it stays like this, I'll go and get it checked out. On the Sunday, my knee started to swell up, locked in place. Basically, my body started attacking itself. And by the following week, I was in hospital, pretty much immobile. My immune system attacking my body, and felt like I was on fire. It was absolute agony. And it just came out of the blue from nowhere. A week before that, I'd been playing five-a-side to suddenly end up in hospital bed. Couldn't feed myself properly. I had nurses taking me to go and sit down in the shower. Couldn't go to the toilet on my own. I'd lost my independence, my physicality, my mobility in less than a week. And it just makes you stop. Well, firstly, I had to delegate everything that I could. I still kind of sat there with my one hand, trying to use voice activation to send messages. Yeah, it just wiped me out. And it was really difficult because at that point, my son was 18 months old and he weren't speaking, but he was coming to visit me at the hospital and looking at me with his massive eyes like, Daddy, why can't you play? And my wife was pregnant, 6 months in with my daughter. And I'd actually started to plan stepping away from the business a bit, stepping away from operations and becoming more strategic because I needed to be there. All of a sudden, everyone needed to be there for me. It was tough to have that feeling. But what that meant is for a month, I was in a hospital bed, getting tested for everything under the sun, trying to work out why. And they couldn't actually find out exactly why my immune system had decided to go nuts. But what they did come to a conclusion is no matter what started it, the treatment's the same. We give you medication that stops your immune system. We drain all the fluid off your joints and you go and learn to walk again and see how it goes. So that's a journey that I went on, like an 11-month rehab, intensive physio. My daughter's born in that period. So I'm determined to get back on my feet before my daughter starts walking. And I managed that and incredibly proud. I had some issues with my back, had some issues with how I was walking. But ultimately, it just shows what you'll go through, what your mindset needs to be to recover, and just how much you'll do for other people.
Just wanted to touch on that with your illness and whatnot. So what helped you get through that tough and challenging period, would you say?
I'd say the biggest thing, Blair, was firstly having my daughter. So when my daughter was born, I was in like intensive physio, doing hydrotherapy in the pool, trying to stand on my feet and take steps again. When she was born, I was there holding her, and I thought I have a responsibility to get back on my feet and get back well again, so I can play with my kids. And I wanted to get back on my feet so I could walk with my daughter when she started. It's a real powerful driver. What I also kind of realized is that after the initial feelings of, why me, why now, this ain't fair. I looked after myself. I've never been ill before. And then like something like this happens and I'm wiped out. I realized actually I couldn't change it. I couldn't change what had happened. But what I could do is influence and control the outcomes. So what I realized is that actually I needed to be grateful for what I did have. I was sat there in hospital one day and it just occurred to me, you know what? You're getting free healthcare. You've got free education. You've never been hungry. You've never been homeless. You live in the first world, like you've been able to set up a business. Some people in some countries, you can't, you simply can't do that. I'd managed to be in a financial position where I wasn't worried about going on stat sick pay and not being able to pay my mortgage, stuff like that. I just realized, damn Lee, like you need to be grateful. And that also gave me a platform. So when I went into walking rehab, right, there were 9 of us, people who had strokes, spinal injuries, lower limb injuries. What I noticed, right, is that 3 of us had come to a place of acceptance that this is pretty, SHIT situation to be in, but we're just going to do what we can and take ownership and accountability over our recovery. 3 of us. Interestingly, that same 3 of us had our heads up, like asking, the physiotherapist, what can we do? What else can we do? Who were the first 3 out of walking rehab into intensive physio? Because the 3 of us who got into a place where we'd accepted what had happened, and we didn't sit there wishing it didn't happen. We didn't sit there thinking, 6 months ago I used to be doing this. We were just laser focused on let's get into the best position that we can. I think that's a lesson for anyone going through adversity, and think about how you can take ownership over things. Focus on those things that you can control, things that you can influence. Don't spend any energy wishing things were different. Yeah. Don't spend any energy on the things you can't control. And, I'm still on my feet today. So I feel blessed, You'll do more for other people than you do for yourself. And if you take ownership and accountability over the things you can control, you will get outcomes. They might, I'm 70% physically where I was. That's as good as it's getting. But that's so much better than like being 10% where I was at that point.
That's brilliant. Honestly, I found that story just really inspiringly. And how long was the recovery process, and how many years have you been able to walk again since going through the recovery?
Yeah, so that happened just as I turned 29 in June 2014. So now we're June, 2023, 9 years later. So the recovery process, I could walk a mile unaided after 11 months. So it was like a whole year of recovery. Since then, I've been on medication to, suppress my immune system. Managed to come off that in 2019. Just became a massive experiment and a massive project. And that's given me the energy to really push on with this new business as well. But ultimately, during that period as well, I went and did my master's, stayed at home with my kids, and just stepped out of my business. And comically, when you step out your own business, you realize how much you're in the way. And also you realize, just how much you can be a blocker, and how other people are actually more competent than you think, and actually probably better than you at lots of things too. No, I enjoyed that time with my kids, and that made me different as well. Spending time with your kids makes you more present, more patient, better communicator. And hell, I'm much better at negotiating now. Having 2 kids up against you, double teaming you in negotiations, you've got to get sharp, man. Definitely hone my skills. But yeah, I think ultimately, that period of recovery, it really got me to reflect, made me a lot more grateful, made me appreciate life. Also, has made me grow through that adversity. Because I said, like, I'm 70% physically. It's not getting better than that because I'm a bit damaged and a bit limited, right? But I'm 200% mentally through going through that and growing and using that trauma to grow, man. And we can all use adversity because adversity don't discriminate. The adversity that you go through is so often what makes you not only passionate and fueled to make change, but also, a more refined person out the other side.
Like Blair said earlier, truly, truly inspiring. And I can imagine a lot of the audience just thinking like, wow, how does he do it? And talk me through, where did you develop that mindset from, that you just like, whatever adversity, I'm going to go out and try and defy the odds. And like you said, a lot of people who would have been in that position if they were immobilized and couldn't walk again. I think you said there was 9 people, the other 6 said had pretty much just given up in their head mentally. And, yourself and 2 others had it in that, we're going to get ourselves better. Where does your mindset come from?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, Niall. I think that the first part of that is going through prior adversity. I think that, I dropped out of university because my mental health ended up in a shocking place. And I had to go home and spend a year getting my head straight. And I suppose in getting my head straight, I developed a set of skills and a bunch of, a bit of a toolkit for being able to mentally handle challenging situations. That allowed me to go back to university and graduate once I'd re-enrolled. But also what I realized is that year spent, building that toolkit and working on myself and building my own, kind of self-ability to navigate situations meant that when I got made redundant, because that was tough, I was able to kind of turn that round pretty quickly. When bad things happen, you have got to you've got to have that period where you feel like it's crap. If you're so naive, you're like, oh no, it's absolutely fine, then that's a problem as well. You can't ignore when things go badly because there's something to be learned from every time something goes wrong, right? But I think it's born from the fact that I had to be quite adaptable and resilient when I was younger. I've only got a diagnosis of autism in the past 2 years, but being autistic is something I've obviously been since I was born. And I think that also plays a bit of a role, just seeing the world differently and having lots of challenges and never really conforming has meant that I've always been one to question and challenge. And I think that plays part in it as well, where it instead of like worrying and being, sorry for myself, I was like, what can I do? I also think, you go through that prior adversity, it gives you the skills. It also gives you the belief that you can go through a bad time and you can get back up again and keep going. And just being born into a place that was quite deprived, you saw how people's attitudes changed their pathway. And you could see, actually, even from you could go and achieve great things, but you had to really graft, really apply yourself, and really take hold of the options and opportunities you had in front of you, because the opportunities are less if you start with less exposure to them, but the opportunities are still there. And one of those opportunities might just be your pathway to something better. So for me, it's part of growing up in a relatively, lesser privileged position and seeing that play out. It's going through stuff and learning how to handle that. And it's also probably a bit of me just thinking differently about challenges. I look back now and a lot of people say, oh, it happened to me. It's so bad. I'm like, it happened for me. It woke me up. It got me to think differently. It got me to challenge. It challenged me, man. It wasn't a threat. It was a challenge. And I had to step up, literally, back onto my feet again.
And speaking of opportunities, so even though you went through that challenging period, you came back on your feet and you ended up selling your video game business. And then in March of 2020, you then founded another business which became Essentialise. And that mainly focuses on health and well-being. Did that idea for your business come as a result of the difficulties that you had during that period, that dark period, and you were like, you want to coach people and help them with their health? Or talk me through that.
Yeah, so the origin for the business was firstly that personal journey and kind of realizing, I'd managed to empower myself. How can we help other people do that? Because I used to think, if I was an employee at that point I got ill, I'd have got stat sick pay. That wouldn't have, kept my family going. And I'd have needed that stack sick pay for quite a while. And how would have that impacted me financially? So I wanted, to think, how can I help employees to empower their health so that doesn't happen? And if it does happen, they can go through the same process as me to get themselves back well enough to get back to work. Secondly, when you run a business, especially when you run a business in tech, you see the impact of people not being well. Like, I saw the economic cost to my own business when people were struggling. And I thought, there's a real clear business case here. If we're able to support people on their health journey, they don't end up, off on the sick. They don't end up leaving because, they're not able to work effectively. And the performance increases. So I was like, there's a clear business case here. The link between well-being and performance is really clear. It's only become more clear over the past few years as companies have really dialed into it, and we've got more and more data to show that. I think the other thing as well was I was looking at what businesses were doing. I went out to the States and researched to find out what companies were doing in the space. People are doing things just for the sake of doing them, and have no idea what the impact is. Like fruit bowls and bean bags and slides. It's all good, right? And then COVID hit, and it's like, yeah, no one's on the slide, man, because no one's in the office. And that fruit's going moldy in the corner. But no, jokes aside, I just kind of saw there wasn't anyone delivering like effective data-driven well-being. There was a massive market opportunity there, but we needed to change the opinion of the market, which is a challenge in itself, because it's easy to jump in with quick solutions. It's harder to do it properly. Saw the own challenges that I had and the business acumen and some of the industries that I'd worked in as well, and just seeing the challenges that they had as well. As far as I could see, there was something there. But also the biggest thing that stuck out to me is of all the services that there were, everything was white. Everything in the wellbeing space is white and generally pretty middle class. So I was like, where's the wellbeing going to be for people like me? Yeah. And especially as a man in the space. Ain't many men in the space either. And I thought, you know what? I need to be that role model. Like, I want kids, I want that little black lad at school to think, you know what, I can go and do psychology and help people get well. And, whether I'm a doctor or whether I'm a coach, like I wanted young kids who are like me to see something that they could potentially be. So I thought, what am I going to do? I'm going to actually put myself out there. I'm going to build something that, sets an example. I'm just going to I'm going to enjoy the journey. And that was the biggest thing. Yeah. Just the same as you guys. You enjoy what you do because you are breaking through those boundaries. You are setting an example and you're taking the next generation with you.
And Lee, just wanted to ask, since setting up Essentialise, a running and inclusive wellbeing business, what makes you passionate about what you do?
To be honest, Blair, I think for me, I wake up in the morning, I know I'm making an impact. Yeah. I get to collaborate with great people. I get to work with businesses and see the difference that we can make. I get to see and I get messages from young people saying, I'm inspired by what you're doing. It's different. Like, keep doing it. We've won a few awards. And again, those awards, I ain't bothered about the glass trophy off, trophystore.com. But I am thinking that some judges somewhere have looked at what we do and are thinking, yeah, we're gonna recognize that and tell them to keep doing what they're doing because it's making a difference. Ultimately, for me, fundamentally, it's about love. I love what I do, love the people I do it with, I love the impact that I can make. And I get up in the morning and I'm ready to go. And I know there's so many people out there who go to bed on a Sunday night thinking, man, I got to go to work on a Monday. Yeah. And it's just being able to actually be part of changing that, not only how I feel, but how other people feel when they go into the workplace. Because, when you're from a marginalised group, there are enough challenges out in society anyway. There's enough inequity that exists. So we've got to create spaces where people can feel safe, where people can execute good work. And for me, I'm just passionate about what I do. I think that comes through. People then vibe off that and resonate with that. But also, I'm not scared to challenge, and I will push back against things, and I will call people out. And you need to be passionate, have energy, because you're pushing back against systems and structures that have existed for hundreds of years.
I wanted to also ask Lee, what would you say is the most important lesson you've learned during your entrepreneurial journey?
What I will say, just to add to that last point, Blair, is that while it's easy to look at employees and think, they don't want to go in on a Monday morning, entrepreneurship, not glamorous. Man, it's graft. There's always things going wrong. It's not what you see on Instagram. I ain't popping no champagne corks and driving no Lambos. I'm just making stuff happen, man. It's not what you imagine it is. People aren't sharing the 12-hour shift that they do at the desk. to make stuff happen when you've got a new project comes in and you've got to, you get your information out there. It's like there's a realism to it. I make it sound sometimes like I'm out there on the battlefield, on the front lines, like fighting a good fight. There are sometimes I'm sat in the tent, like drawing up some plans. It's a fine balance, and I think that it's not as glamorous as people imagine that it actually is. But I think the biggest lesson on my journey is that firstly to understand where you bring value, and when you start out, you're going to be doing everything.
Yeah.
Unless you've got some big ass funding from one of Daddy's friends. But for most Black entrepreneurs, we're working with the buttons we've got. You look at the funding figures, it says it all, man. If you're a certain type of person, you can go and get, a delicious 7-figure seed funding for your proof of concept that don't exist and for your really crap product market fit. I ain't gonna say any more about that. But you by doing everything, you get to learn what you can do effectively. But more, you start to learn, number one, what you enjoy. You've got to understand where you bring the value and what you enjoy. If you can find something that you enjoy doing, because you might be really good at something, but you might not enjoy it. You don't want to shoehorn yourself into doing that for the rest of your career. Something that you enjoy, something that brings a lot of value that you can do more effectively than your team. Bring people around you who can do the other stuff better than you can. And gradually build that process, build that network. You've got a stakeholder manage. People know about you. And I know people talk a lot about personal brand, but the opportunities you can get from being out there and being seen in your field as someone who is blazing a trail. Don't be quiet about it. Find your voice within that. For some people, they want to shout damn loud. For other people, they're just quietly putting out there just how good they are. But back it up. Don't just be all talk. So for me, it's like, find that value, but make sure fundamentally that you enjoy what you do. There's value in what you do, because there's no point, doing something you enjoy, but no one ain't going to pay for. Because trust me, you ain't going to enjoy the other stuff then. But also find something that the world needs, something with purpose. Go make it happen. But always remember that with those 3 things, it becomes, even though it's not glamorous, you're gonna be ready for the journey. And that you never know where that train's gonna go when you start a business. That train might crash, but then you get out of the wreckage and you're like, damn, let's go and find the next station, start the next journey. And sometimes you even need to take a job between the stations once you've crashed your train. It's not the end of the road, but use the lessons from crashing that train to make sure you don't crash the next one. Because if you crash too many trains, people won't let you drive it anymore.
Who made it?
One of the things I'd like to ask is, you've done a lot, you've accomplished a lot, but what would be your proudest achievement to date?
Definitely getting back walking and walking my first steps with my daughter. It's the most proudest thing for me. It's a memory that'll be emblazoned on my mind forever. And I've got some pretty cool awards, like a fellowship from National Academy of Sciences. It's nice to get a bit of recognition, but it's the things that actually matter in life. When you actually overcome adversity and you're able to do something with someone who, means an awful lot to you. Those are the things you'll remember when you're throwing some kind of retirement party. I mean, for our generation, we aren't going to retire. We're just going to keep making impacts until the day we aren't here anymore. But at some point in the future, when I'm old and I'm grey, and I'll look like Sir Trevor McDonald, I'll be like, there'll be things I'll remember, all these great things, but actually I remember the things that matter. And for me, it's always going to be turning that adversity and taking those steps with my daughter when she started walking. You never rise on your own. And especially within our community, we do need to ascend together. And, collaboration is important. For the people in the north, if we're going to level up, we need to level up together. So it's like, bring people on the journey with you. Never go it alone. And realize that your best moments will not be what you're recognized for. It'll be what you do with other people.
One of the things I noticed on the background was you had experience as a elite performance coach. Was it with Momentum Sports Performance? And we've been talking about like entrepreneurial mindset. Can you tell us a bit about that experience as a performance coach?
Yeah, so it's quite an interesting. When I talked about opportunities coming your way, that was one of those. So after losing my professional training budget at the National Bank and then getting made redundant, I was like, I'm going to pay to train myself in things. So I started a series of qualifications around nutrition, sports performance, human performance. And I ended up with an opportunity one day where someone who I was, effectively like a course leader said, do you want to go and apply these principles in a football club? And that football club was a small local football club in League Two. Off I trotted. I was like, yeah, I can do this as a bit of a side project thing. Let's see how that goes. Drew up some performance frameworks for this team, and they're like, don't have the budget to execute this. But there's an academy of another club who would probably bite your hand off for this stuff. So off that took me to Everton and then to Man City, where I worked with academy and first development elite teams to actually bring together aspects of performance. So, these clubs spending millions and millions of pounds on enhancing sleep, on specific coaching and training, on the other aspects of endurance and performance, but they didn't seem to be linking them all together. So my job was to see what was happening and see what the players were funding themselves and trying to knit that into a framework that could be replicated across an academy so that, players of the future would have a framework to be able to maximize their performance, but understand their individual aspects as well. So while I only did that for just under a year and decided, firstly, I'm running a business, I don't have time for this. And secondly, I kind of planted the seed. Other people can push on with this. And that was in the very early days of, City's Academy, where they just built 82 rooms. Just reflecting back now, I'm still in contact with a few people. It still seems like, some of the things that I implemented have a bit of a legacy and have been developed. And yeah, it just makes you think that could have been a whole other career if I decided to go in that direction. But it's a very cutthroat industry. Again, it's not very diverse behind the scenes. I learned a lot about myself and my own values there and how they weren't being met. And what I would say is for all the the joys of meeting really interesting people and, being in that world, didn't really meet my values. So actually, in some ways, it wasn't the place for me.
Now, Lee, we're going to go on to the bonus part of the episode. And this one, the first one I'm going to judge you on. Should pineapple be on pizza?
As far as I'm concerned, you can have whatever you want on your pizza. But I aren't eating pineapple on a pizza. Not for me. Not for me.
Thank God. And then the last question. If you could have a dinner party, and, if you could have a dinner party, you can only invite 3 guests. Could be dead or alive. Who would you invite?
Oh man, Jesus! No, I'd have Lewis there. Get Lewis there. Invite him.
Is that Mr. Hamilton or
Mr. Hamilton? Yeah, because come on, look, he's kind of experienced going out there completely pushing it back against an industry which is, incredibly lacking in diversity. But then realised that it's not just a case of role modelling, but changing the systems as well. I think similarly, I'd have Barack Obama there as well. Because again, I'm all for people who've blazed those trails. If you're a first, you know what? You've probably had to do an awful lot to get there. And, when he speaks, he sounds wise. He brings presence into a room. And I'm absolutely sure he'd drop some serious nuggets of knowledge if he was in that room as well. Probably the third one, and this is probably a bit different, but my granddad passed away 5 years ago. I'd have him back there at the table with me, Lewis, and Barack. And I just think that'd close the loop because he was a wise man. So let's close that loop. My granddad, Lewis Hamilton, Barack Obama.
Excellent. Well, Lee, thank you so much for being a guest on the See Me Be Me podcast. And where can people follow you as part of your journey? Where can people go to?
So the best places are on my website, which is leechambers.org, and I'm active on LinkedIn. So find me on LinkedIn, Lee Chambers. I'll probably be the first one at the top of your pile. So connect, follow, and I'm always posting stuff about journeys. So you'll get to dig in, find out a bit more.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Thanks very much, Lee. Take care.
Thanks, Lee.
Bye-bye.